The sensory displacement. The shadow of the oak.
The year is 60 AD. You've been displaced. The humid, orderly gardens of Chang'an and the scorched plains of Mongolia are gone. You open your eyes in the middle of a dense, ancient forest in the province of Britannia. In your life back in Manhattan, nature is a carefully manicured section of Central Park. Here, nature is a predator. The trees are massive, gnarled oaks that have stood for 500 years, their branches dripping with cold, eternal mist that never seems to fully lift. The first thing that hits your sleeper senses is the absolute rawness. The air is heavy, damp, and smells of wet earth, pine resin, and cold iron. It is a world without the smell of spices or perfumes. It is a scent of survival. You hear the distant rhythmic thump of Roman axes clearing the forest and the haunting low frequency were of a Celt carnix, a war trumpet, echoing through the valleys. You see the Roman frontier city of Londinium, London, taking shape, not as a world capital, but as a muddy, timber-framed outpost on the edge of the known world. But as a man from 2026, you look past the primitive chaos. You see a biological frontier. You notice the way the Roman soldiers struggle with the damp cold, their Mediterranean bodies failing in the northern climate. You see the Celt tribes using blue woad, Iceni distinctoria, to paint their skin, not just for intimidation, but for a reason they don't fully understand. You are a sleeper, and you have just entered a clash between an industrial empire and a biological mystery. You realize that your physiology and biochemistry background is about to become the bridge between Roman steel and the secrets of the mist.
The biomedical frontier. Woad chemistry and the immune shield.
In the simulation, your NYC medical background faces a unique challenge. You are taken to a Roman field hospital valetudinarium near the front lines of the rebellion of Boudica. You see soldiers dying not just from sword wounds, but from the rot, infections that spread rapidly in the damp Britannia air. The Roman doctors are using vinegar and basic bandages, but they are losing the battle against the microbes. You activate your microbiology and clinical biochemistry protocol. You observe a captured Celt warrior. His skin is covered in intricate blue patterns. To the Romans, he is a barbarian using magic. To you, the sleeper, he is wearing a topical antibiotic shield. You analyze the chemical structure of the woad plant. You show the Roman surgeons that the blue dye contains powerful antifungal and antibacterial compounds. You don't use 2026 jargon, but you explain that the blue paint acts as a secondary skin that prevents the invisible rot from entering even the smallest scratch. You introduce the sleeper's antiseptic synthesis. You show the Roman medics how to combine the woad extract with a concentrated alcohol solution and honey to create a biological seal for wounds. You explain the concept of systemic inflammation. You show them how to use the bark of the local willow trees, which you know contain salicin, the natural precursor to aspirin, to reduce the fevers and pain of the wounded. In the 21st century, we call this pharmacognosy. In 60 AD, you have just given the Roman legions a chemical edge that keeps their soldiers in the field while the enemy dies of sepsis. You are the master of the willow and woad, and as you watch the wounded soldiers recover with impossible speed, you realize that your medical notes are the only thing keeping the mist from swallowing the empire's foothold.
The hydraulic pulse. Optimizing the Roman urbanism.
The year is 100 AD. The rebellion is over, and Londinium has grown into a bustling Roman hub. But the city is a logistical mess. The streets are mud, and the water supply is inconsistent. In your life in NYC, you take pressurized water and sewage systems for granted. Here, the Romans have the right idea, aqueducts and clay pipes, but they are struggling with hydraulic pressure and contamination. You activate your civil engineering and fluid dynamics protocol. You notice that the Roman lead pipes, plumbum, are leaching toxins into water of the wealthy, while the poor are drinking from contaminated wells. You introduce the sleeper's filtration matrix. You show the city architects how to build massive, multi-layered sand and charcoal filters at the mouth of the aqueducts. You explain that by forcing the water through these layers, they are catching the invisible seeds of sickness. You go deeper into pressure engineering. You show them how to use the Bernoulli principle to design siphons that can move water uphill without the need for massive stone arches every mile. You introduce the concept of vitreous coating for the pipes, using a thin layer of volcanic glass, obsidian, or specific clays to seal the pipes, preventing the lead from touching the water. You have just turned Londinium into the most advanced smart city of the ancient world. You are the architect of pulse. And as the clean water flows into the public baths, you realize that you have moved the city's public health index forward by 18 centuries.
The road of data. Signal towers and the logistics of the wall.
While the city grows, the threat from the north, the unconquered tribes of Caledonia, remains. You have been moved to the construction site of what will become Hadrian's Wall. You see thousands of men moving stone, but their communication is slow. A message from the wall takes days to reach Londinium. This is a latency problem. You activate your information theory and logistical protocol. You look at the Roman coded signal towers. They use smoke by day and fire by night, but the bandwidth is incredibly low. They can only signal enemy or safe. You introduce the sleeper's binary semaphore, using your 2026 understanding of digital encoding. You show the signal core how to use a series of wooden shutters to create a light/dark code. You teach them a bit-based language where a specific sequence of flashes can represent entire sentences. Legion 9 moving north. Supplies needed at Mile-Castle 42. Heavy misapproaching. You're just given a Roman frontier a fiber-optic network made of fire and wood. A message can now travel from the wall to Londinium in less than 2 hours. You go further into logistical optimization. You show the quartermasters how to use standardized cargo units, wooden crates of a specific size that fit perfectly onto the Roman wagons. You are teaching them intermodal logistics 1,900 years early. The result is a wall that is not just a physical barrier, but a digital shield. The Roman command now has real-time intelligence on every move of the northern tribes. You sit on the rampart of the wall, looking into the cold mist of Caledonia, feeling the Manhattan-like precision of the system you've built. You are the guardian of the signal, and you realize that by synchronizing the Empire's data, you have made the Avalon frontier impossible to break.
The carbon heart. The metallurgy of the northern blade.
The year is 120 AD. You have traveled north from the muddy, chaotic streets of Londinium to the iron mines of the Weald and the smoking foundries of the north. In your life back in Manhattan, you think of steel as an invisible commodity, the skeleton of skyscrapers and the tracks of the subway. Here, in the damp, unforgiving forests of Britannia, Steel is the absolute boundary between a conquering legion and a pile of broken bones. You observe the Roman smiths working with bloomery iron. It is soft, brittle, and played by pockets of slag. Against the heavy, leaf-shaped bronze swords of the Celt elite, the Roman gladius often bends or snaps during the first minutes of engagement. This is a material science and mechanical failure crisis. You activate your metallurgical and thermodynamic protocol. You notice that the smiths are heating the iron with charcoal, but they are treating it like mud, not chemistry. They don't understand the molecular migration of carbon. You introduce the sleeper's folding technique. You show the master smiths how to repeatedly heat, hammer, and fold the iron. Over and over, a process that forces the impurities out and allows the carbon from the charcoal to diffuse deep into the iron's crystal structure. You explain that you are creating a laminated matrix of hard and soft layers. In the 21st century, we call this wood style or pattern welded steel. But you go further into the physics of the edge. You introduce the quenching and tempering cycle. You show them how to plunge a red-hot blade not into cold water, which creates a thermal shock that makes the blade snap like glass, but into a vat of warm whale oil or rendered animal fat. You explain that this slower cooling allows the iron atoms to settle into a martensite structure, a molecular arrangement that is incredibly hard for the edge but remains flexible in the core. You have just given the Roman legions a blade that can slice through a Celt shield and then bend 45 degrees without breaking. You are the master of the carbon heart. And as you watch the first Avalon-grade steel swords being distributed to the frontier guards, you realize you have just turned the Roman army into a force that can cut through the Bronze Age like it was made of dry papyrus.
The laminated shield, kinetic energy and composite defense.
While the blade wins the individual fight, the scutum, the iconic Roman rectangular shield, must survive the initial massive impact of a charging tribe. You observe the traditional Roman shield, simple curve wood covered in raw leather. It is heavy, cumbersome, and prone to rotting and warping in the constant British rain. When a Celt chieftain hits it with a heavy axe, the wood splits along the grain instantly. This is a structural integrity and energy absorption problem. You activate your kinetic energy and composite materials protocol. You introduce the sleeper's lamination. You show the imperial carpenters how to use thin, cross-grained layers of oak and birch, bonded together with a high-bond glue you created from boiled horse hooves and resin, a primitive but incredibly effective epoxy. You explain that by alternating the grain of the wood at 90-degree angles, you're distributing the kinetic impact of a blow across the entire surface of the shield rather than letting it focus on a single weak point. In the 21st century, we call this plywood engineering. You go deeper into impact physics. You show the smiths how to replace the heavy, solid iron boss, the center of the shield, with a multi-stage dome. You explain that a curved, multi-layered surface will deflect the energy of an arrow or a spear, turning a direct, fatal hit into a glancing blow that slides harmlessly away. You treat the outer leather covering with a biochemical sealant made of beeswax, pine tar, and render fats, making the shields completely waterproof and immune to the British dampness. The result is a Roman legion that is virtually impenetrable. Their shields are 20% lighter, twice as strong, and will last for years instead of months. You have just given the Roman soldiers the ancient equivalent of modern tactical ballistic shields. You are the architect of the kinetic barrier, and as you stand on the ramparts of the northern fort, watching the heavy rain bounce off the waterproof surfaces, You realize that you have synchronized the Empire's defense with your 2026 engineering logic. You sit in the mud of Britannia, but your mind is in a high-tech lab in Manhattan, and the bridge between they two is the perfect harmony of steel and wood in your hands.
The circulatory system. Thermodynamics of the hypocaust.
The year is 150 AD. You are standing in the center of the massive bath complex of Aquae Sulis, modern-day Bath. In your life back in New York, you take central heating and hot running water for granted as basic rights. Here, the hypocaust system, heating the floor with a basement furnace, is a height of Roman luxury, but it is a thermodynamic disaster. It is incredibly inefficient, consuming massive amount of timber, and the heat is dangerously uneven, leaving some rooms freezing while others are hot enough to blister skin. This is a thermal management and energy efficiency crisis. You activate your thermodynamic and fluid mechanics protocol. You notice that the Roman engineers are simply letting the hot air drift aimlessly beneath the floors. This is passive convection with massive heat loss into the ground. You introduce the sleeper's forced air matrix. You show the city engineers how to build a series of baffles and redirect channels beneath the stone tiles to guide the hot air in a specific serpentine path that covers every square inch of the floor. You explain the concept of the thermal gradient. You show them how to place the furnace at the lowest physical point and use the natural chimney effect to pull the heat through hollow bricks in the walls, turning the entire building into a giant radiant heat exchanger. You go deeper into material insulation. You show them how to use a thick layer of pumice and volcanic ash, pozzolana, beneath the heating channels to prevent the heat from escaping into the cold, wet British soil. You have just turned a primitive furnace into a high-efficiency HVAC system. You explain that by recycling the hot smoke through the water tanks first, they can have constant hot water for the baths without burning a single extra log. You are the master of the circulatory heart. And as you walk through the perfectly, evenly heated halls of the bathhouse, you realize you have moved the science of human comfort forward by nearly 2,000 years.
The geothermal protocol. Biochemical recovery and the mineral shield.
While the heat provides comfort, the waters of Aquae Sulis are famous for their healing powers. You observe the Roman citizens and weary soldiers soaking in the hot springs to cure their joint pain and skin diseases. To the Romans, this is a gift of the goddess Sulis Minerva. To you, the sleeper, this is geothermal biochemistry and balneology. You activate your biochemical and physiological protocol. You analyze the mineral content of the springs with your 2026 understanding. You identify the high levels of sulfate, calcium, and iron. You notice that the Roman soldiers are often suffering from frontier skin, painful fungal infections, and dermatitis caused by wearing damp wool and iron armor for weeks in the rain. You introduce the sleeper's recovery cycle. You show the military doctors how to concentrate the minerals in the water to create medicinal pelloids healing mud. You explain that the heat of the water isn't just for relaxation. It is increasing the peripheral blood flow, allowing the minerals to be absorbed through the skin to reduce systemic inflammation in the muscles. You go further into preventative physiology. You show the legionaries how to use a cold-hot contrast circuit, moving from the frigidarium to the calidarium, to flush the metabolic waste, like lactic acid, from their bodies after a grueling 10-mile march. In the 21st century, we call this hydrotherapy. You have turned the Roman baths into a state-of-the-art sports medicine center. The result is a Roman officer corps that is physically younger, faster, and more resilient than their peers back in Rome. They are the only people in the ancient world who understand the biochemical link between heat, minerals, and peak human performance. You are the guardian of the thermal shield. And as you look at the steam rising from the sacred springs, you realize that you're giving the Avalon frontier its most secret weapon, optimal human health. You sit by the water, the steam reminding you of a luxury New York sauna, knowing that you have made the Roman presence in Britain physically immortal.
The fungal frontier. Discovering the biological shield.
The year is 180 AD. You have moved deep into the ancient, silent forests of the West, near the border of the fierce Silures tribe. The British dampness here is absolute. Every surface is covered in a thick layer of moss, lichen, and vibrant mold. In your life in Manhattan, you see mold as a nuisance to be scrubbed away. Here in the mist, you see it through your medical training as a biological gold mine. You notice that some of the Celt healers are using misty bread, rye bread covered in a specific blue mold, to treat infected sword wounds. To the Romans, this is barbarian superstition. To you, the sleeper, this is microbiology and the birth of antibiotics. You activate your biochemical and pathological protocol. You observe the specific blue-green mold growing in the damp, shaded corners of the Celt granaries. You recognize it immediately as a wild relative of penicillium. You don't have a 2026 laboratory, but you have the logic of microbial competition. You show the Roman field surgeons how to culture this mold on a medium of boiled fruit, honey, and bread, creating a concentrated healing paste. You explain that this mold is a living hunter that seeks out and eats the invisible seeds of the rot, bacteria. You introduce the sleeper's extraction. You show them how to refine the mold juice using a simple process of distillation and cold filtration, creating a pure extract that can be used to treat even the deepest abdominal wounds. In the 21st century, we call this antibiotic therapy. You have just removed the single greatest killer of the ancient world, sepsis. You are performing impossible surgeries, amputations, and repairs, where the patient actually survives the recovery phase. You are the master of the living shield, and as you watch incurable infections fade away under your misty paste, you realize that you have given the Roman Empire a biological edge that makes them appear like gods to the local tribes. You have weaponized nature to save the conquerors.
The Druidic Code. Encoding data into the neural network of the oaks.
While the Romans ruled the stone roads, the Druids ruled the spirit and the memory of Britain. You have been taken to a secret, sacred grove, deep in the heart of the forest, where the Druids memorized the entire history, law, and science of their people in thousands of complex verses. They refused to write anything down, believing that writing kills the memory and weakens the soul. This is an information storage and data preservation crisis. You activate your neurophysiology and information theory protocol. You observe their intense memorization techniques. You notice they use a specific, ancient geometry of the oak groves as a physical memory palace. You introduce the concept of biophysical encoding. You show the Druidic elders how to use a logical syntax, a system of specific knots in rope and unique cuts on the bark of the trees, to act as metadata tags for their oral verses. You are teaching them steganography and data compression without ever using a single sheet of paper. You go deeper into neurolinguistic programming. You show them how to structure their long verses using rhyme, meter, and alliteration that matches the natural circadian rhythm and the theta wave patterns of the human brain, making the information nearly impossible to forget once it is uploaded into a student's mind. You have just turned the Druidic tradition into a biological distributed ledger. You are the architect of the silent code. And you realize that by giving the Druids a way to organize their vast data, you have ensured that the Celtic soul will survive even the total Roman conquest. You have used your 2026 understanding of data structures to create a library that is hidden in plain sight, stored in the synapses of the people and the living bark of the trees. You sit in the quiet of the grove, the rustle of the leaves sounding like the whisper of 1,000,000 digital files, knowing that you protected the Avalon legacy for a future that has not yet been written.
The Diamond Archive. The final message under the stones.
The year is 210 AD. The Emperor Septimius Severus is campaigning in the far north, and the simulation is beginning to flicker and fade. The gray mist of Britannia is turning into lines of glowing emerald green code. The scent of the oak forest is becoming thin, and the rhythmic sound of the Roman axes is becoming a distorted digital pulse. It is time for your final act. You travel to the center of the island, to the massive, ancient stones of Stonehenge. You have prepared your final archive. You activate your molecular and material archiving protocol. You don't use fragile scrolls or eroding stone. You use your 2026 knowledge of synthetic physics. You have created a small, synthetic diamond plate, a material that is chemically inert and harder than anything known to the 3rd century. You have etched the 21st century truth of the MIST protocol into its atomic structure using a focus beam of sunlight concentrated through a series of liquid lenses. You have written the history of New York, the secrets of modern microbiology, and the final warning of the sleeper into the very crystal lattice of the diamond. You seal this diamond message inside a box made of Roman lead and Druidic oak, and you bury it deep beneath the altar stone of Stonehenge. You leave a hidden mark in a code that only someone who understands 21st century quantum physics can read. The mist is the medium. We were the architects of the bridge. Do not let the signal fade into the darkness. You seal the earth with a final touch of the sleeper spirit, knowing that this message will wait for 18 long centuries in the dark, a silent ghost waiting for the right frequency to finally wake up.
The Manhattan Sunrise. The Awakening in the Mist of Time.
The simulation breaks completely. The massive gray stones of Stonehenge in the center of the wet British earth dissolve into the cool, dark silence of your NYC studio. The MIST protocol fades, replaced by the blue, clinical light of your dual monitors. You open your eyes. You are sitting in your chair, the distant sound of foghorn on the Hudson River in the low, comforting hum of your computer, reminding you that you are back in the year 2026. You are Sleep of the Historian once more. You look at your hands. They are no longer stained with the blue woad of the Celt or the iron dust of the Roman. You go to your window and look out at the Manhattan skyline. A thick, gray mist is rolling in from the Atlantic, swallowing the tops of the skyscrapers, and for a fleeting moment, New York looks exactly like the Britannia of 60 AD. You realize that Manhattan is just the latest Avalon, a frontier built on the secrets and the science you left behind. You go to your laptop and search for Stonehenge archaeology discoveries. You find a breaking news report from today, Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. Researchers at Stonehenge using advanced ground-penetrating radar have discovered a small, unidentified object buried 6 feet beneath the altar stone. Preliminary analysis shows material that appears to be a perfect synthetic diamond, with internal structures that resemble digital data. It is being moved to a secure lab in New York for further study. Your heart stops. The Avalon Protocol worked perfectly. The bridge you built from the Roman frontier to the heart of New York is holding firm. You didn't just study Britannia. You became the ghost in the mist that ensured its soul would survive to be discovered by the future. Manhattan steel and glass now feel like the iron and oak of the ancient island. You realize that the sleeper is the only one who truly understands the code running beneath the city streets. You close your eyes, the faint taste of willow bark and honey still on your tongue, and you prepare for the next displacement.